Want to make sure if you want to make some motions before you leave that you.
You know, I don't know, I've
That's right.
had quite a career
How many
here.
Yes, you have.
Not
You
sure.
get to say, but it's your last chance.
Okay.
Maybe at the next meeting, I've got one more regular meeting.
I'm gonna make a
Wow.
lot of things that require motions then. Put a lot on that
Yeah.
agenda.
It's real good, and bring in all the people with
You make them like
un-
on the
Really
floor
complicated
motions.
name.
Yeah.
That's right.
the real
really
unpronounceable
quick
names, lots of
legally.
consonants.
All right,
so-
are we
Very
ready?
intricate.
Do we have people on?
We do.
All right, we are ready to begin. This is the regular meeting of the Select Board on April 26, 2022. In the room, we have Jim Salvi, Courtney Fresha, and myself, Ellen Sturgis, and Megan Birch-McMichael is waving to us from home. So this meeting will be recorded. We will do roll call votes if it is not unanimous. On that, I will ask if there's any public input, and it appears we have no public. Is that right?
Not in front of us, and
Not
no
in front of
one
us.
has their hand raised yet on
Do you see people? I don't see people, so. Anyway, okay. Oh, there are people. We're not seeing little pictures up there. Usually we see the pictures up there.
no one has their camera on.
Okay, all right.
That's me.
Just you. Okay. Moving on, board member comments. Just a couple things from me. First, congratulations, the Friends of Randall Library. The book sale looked very successful. I had a blast and did not take too many books home with me. So congratulations to you all for doing that. The first time in my memory that the Randall Library has had a book sale. And then Council on Aging still seems to be looking for Bridges Together volunteers, people over 60 to work with the fourth graders. I think it was starting it might have started this, or might be starting this week, but contact the Council on Aging if you're interested. And last, you'll hear about it again tonight, but town meeting, May 14th, Saturday, May 14th, starting at 9 a.m. at Hale Middle School. Other announcements from the board? Megan, anybody? Nothing? All right, moving on. So we have a few recognitions tonight. We have 2 Eagle Scouts. I think we mentioned at the previous couple meetings, we have a lot of Eagle Scouts are catching up because of COVID. Their courts of honor were postponed. So we have 2 more this weekend. And I will read the certificate of achievement and then ask for a motion. The first one is to Ethan Henry, and in recognition of your achievement of attaining the rank of Eagle Scout. Congratulations on achieving your goal. We're proud to have you as a member of our community and appreciate your service project completed in 2021 at the Leggett Memorial Woodland. The picnic area that you cleared along the hiking path and the picnic table you built can be used by individuals and families while they are out enjoying the woods on a hike. These features serve to enhance this conservation area and can be enjoyed for years to come. We wish you the best of luck in the future. Signed, the Select Board. And I will take a motion, or we're gonna do them together. We'll do them together. And then the second one is to, oh boy, Drew Abrutyn. Hopefully I didn't ruin your last name. Also attaining the rank of Eagle Scout. Proud to have you and appreciate your service project at the Kane Conservation Area that was completed in 2021. Your project involved building a 3x30 boardwalk that crosses over wetlands, protecting the wetlands and connecting to a public trail, and thus enhancing the nature trail for all visitors. Congratulations, Drew, and thank you, and best of luck to you. And now I will take a motion from, who did it say? You read.
Madam Chair, I move to recognize Boy Scouts Ethan Henry and Drew Abrutyn for achieving the rank of Eagle Scout and to sign the letters and proclamations to be presented at their joint recognition ceremony on Saturday, May 7th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Congratulations again to both of you. And then we have a special certificate of appreciation for 2 people who've done a lot in Stow, and unfortunately, I don't think either one of them could join us this evening. To Chris and Laura Spear, who have just recently moved out of town. I'm gonna read it, and then I think there might be board members who'd like to add to it. So on this 26th day of April 2022, the Stow Select Board hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Chris and Laura Spear as they prepare to move from Stow after many years' residence here. While Laura has been very active in town government, both Laura and Chris have devoted considerable time and talent to community organizations. For his part, Chris has been active in the Stow Boy Scouts, Stow Conservation Trust, Bike for the Woods, and the Neshoba Rotary Club. Along with Laura, as Rotary Club members, they were major organizers of the Rotary's Summertime Wings and Wheels event at Minuteman Airfield. In the last several years, Chris has assisted the moderator by taking responsibility for the slide presentation computer and projector during town meeting. In town government, Laura served on the planning board from 2004 until 2009 and represented planning on the Community Preservation Committee during those years. She also served on the Lower Village Subcommittee. She went on to serve a term on the Select Board from 2009 until 2012 and represented the board for the Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, otherwise known as MAGIC, and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Since then, she's been a member of the Stow Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, known as SMOT, most recently its vice chair, and since 2014 has been deputy moderator at town meeting. Chris and Laura raised their 2 children in Stow and have immersed themselves fully in school, government, and community life over the years with spirit and enthusiasm. On behalf of the entire town, the Select Board wants to thank you both and wish them well in their future endeavors. And adventures, better than endeavors, adventures, because they will be on adventures, I'm sure. Would you care to add anything to that, Jim?
Sure. I think this is a very big loss for the town. I'm happy that the certificate that Phoebe drafted reflects the depth of Chris and Laura's involvement in town. Laura and I overlapped on this board. Ellen, I know she overlapped with you as well. And I think you'll agree with me, it was a different time than now. It was a more difficult time in very many ways. And she handled everything with grace, intelligence. She set a very good tone, especially the year that she was chair. I still use arguments that I remember her using on certain subjects. Chris and I have gotten to know each other very well. We ride bikes together. We'll continue to do that. We rode across the country from San Diego to Savannah together and roomed together for 27 days, and you get to know a guy better than you really want to get to know him when you do something like that. And I will just say, I remember, there's one thing he said that will always stick with me. We were discussing, and don't ask me why we were discussing this, what is spirituality? And Chris said, spirituality is thinking about someone other than yourself. And I really like that definition. So I will certainly miss him, and I think the town as a whole will miss him.
One thing, I think the only thing I could think of that might not have been on that list was that, I think was part of Rotary, but Chris particularly was part of the Veterans Breakfast drive-through
Yes.
that they had to come up with a new plan during COVID. And it was so appreciated and so smooth for a brand new event. And it was just another example of Chris, stepping up and figuring out how to do it. And I will echo what you said about Laura. She not only had grace about it, but she was always so organized and kept us on task, and she just had been a real skill. It's a huge loss to us to have them leave town, but we wish them well. And I don't know if you want to add anything. What else to say?
I've served with Laura on SMOT, and she's been our minute taker, and we have other capable people, of course, but Laura was just gave us great minutes, and they usually came back about 10-15 minutes after the meeting. It's just brilliant. That's a skill I'd like to learn. So, and both of them I've seen over the years really pitching in. It's just great.
Yes. Yeah. Anything else? So do you want to make a motion?
Yep. So I move that the select board vote to approve and sign a certificate of appreciation for Chris and Laura Spear.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Best of luck, best wishes. Okay, now to the town administrator's report.
Yes, I just have a few things this evening. One is I was asked to remind everyone that tomorrow evening from 7 to 9 p.m. is Candidates Night, hosted by the Stow Independent and Stow TV. It will be a live public forum. The forum will introduce the candidates and allow for a limited number of public questions. It is broken up into 3 different groups. The information is on our website for those that would like more information on that. Our COVID cases have increased slightly to 16 cases. We are at a 3.39% positivity rating, which is still lower than the county and the state percentage overall. But we were at 9 at our last meeting and have increased slightly. One thing just for folks to be aware, we have gotten information that unless you have been boosted, you are not considered fully vaccinated any longer. So folks that are close contacts and have not been boosted are required to do the 5-day quarantine under the CDC guidelines. So we are encouraging our employees, if they have not been boosted, to do so. Just because it would allow them to, obviously if they test positive, it's a different situation, they have to quarantine, but if they're just a close contact or a family member tests positive, they would be able to work with a mask. And there is no more COVID time under state law, so people are now required to use their own accrued time for any COVID-related absences.
And that's referring to the first booster, right, not the second booster?
So yes, although we're getting some conflicting information about the timeline on the boosters, and right now they're saying it's about 4 to 5 months that the boosters are good for. So if you were boosted more than 5 months ago, you should be looking to get your second booster. So we're still trying to get some clarification on that, but yes, but.
Yep.
I think there's an age thing on the second one because I'm not eligible for a second booster yet.
It's age and qualifications. So it's
Right.
similar to when the vaccine first came out, that if you meet the
Right.
other criteria, you could be boosted as a second round.
Right.
Last week was Administrative Professionals Week, and I wanted to acknowledge and thank all of the administrative staff that works for the town, with a special shout out to Joyce and Phoebe and all of their hard work for me and the town. So thank you to all of our administrative staff.
Yes, amazing, amazing work.
The board and town residents should be happy to know that the tank is scheduled to be removed from the former Great Road firearms this week. So hopefully we will no longer see that outside. And lastly, I met with the superintendent yesterday, and he is confident that based on his recommendation, the school committee will make the day after Labor Day a professional development day, and therefore we will be able to hold our primary and special election at Center School on that September 5th or 6th, whatever that Tuesday is. So that will be on one of your upcoming agendas to finalize. But the clerk's office is relieved because then they can use the cafeteria and spread out and have enough space for the double ballots and all of the necessary precautions that we still need to take.
It's the 6th.
That's the 6th, yes.
Where's the tank going?
I don't know, the ATF is overseeing the removal of it, so I don't know where it's actually going.
They have a place for it.
But it is leaving. And that is my report this evening.
That's great, thank you. Any questions for the town administrator?
Nope.
All right. So our next item is a joint discussion with the planning board members,
I need to just text him.
about the designation of MBTA Community, as we are, I'm looking.
Yes, I was supposed to text him and give him a heads up.
Should we,
We allowed to take items out of order? Could
so
we
maybe we
take the
could go
minutes,
on the
maybe?
open space deed for the Joanne Drive Subdivision.
Oh, sure.
Get it in front of me, cause I'm not sure, let's see. This is just one of those things that's we've been waiting to,
Yes, so Kathy is on, she provided the documentation.
that's right, that's what I was going to check.
And could
Okay.
certainly fill you in on this first item.
So Kathy, can we pull you out of order to talk about the Joanne Drive subdivision?
Sure. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You've got a memo and a little bit of a crude map in the packet, but this was open space that is at the end of Joanne Drive off of Forest and Sudbury that was required to be set aside as part of the Joanne Drive subdivision. There was a question for a long time about what the fate of it would be, and ultimately, the developer who purchased the property, who's Chuck Block, we've worked with before, is interested in deeding it to the Conservation Commission. We are interested in accepting it. So the Conservation Commission has voted to accept it. They have actually all signed the deed as of today. And now the selectmen need to also vote to accept the deed.
And just for people who haven't looked at the paperwork, is this abutting other conservation land? Is it, I mean, it's a big parcel by itself, right? It's 20, is it 20?
It's a good sized parcel. It's 20
something
something
acres. It does not, it abuts, so the parcel is actually in 3 separate pieces. The largest piece, which is really part of the subdivision, does not abut any other open space. Then there's the railroad bed that's owned by Honey Pot, and then another small parcel on the other side of it. The third parcel, which is entirely wetland, abuts the selectmen-owned Kane parcel in Gleasondale. So it's on the other side of the river.
Great.
Yeah, I was just gonna show the map while we're.
There is a trail on
the largest parcel that leads to a really nice bluff overlooking the river. So it's a very short walk. It's really, I think, going to be mostly a neighborhood parcel of open space. It's already pretty heavily used by that neighborhood. But is, just a nice walk in the woods, basically.
Is there any nice place where someone who doesn't live in the neighborhood can pull over so they can walk up to the bluff?
I think that's something we're going to be looking at. There really isn't a designated parking space, but right now there's a cart road that has been being used that is going to be part of one of the lots. So we're going to need to construct a new access trail, and that'll then link up with the rest of the cart road. So we'll look at whether or not it's possible to just kind of have one informal parking space or something there.
I don't want to encourage non-resident area neighborhoods to start parking willy-nilly. So just sit tight, people, and wait for conservation to create something. So there we go.
Yeah, it'll take a little while, but it's definitely on our radar screen, and we're looking forward to connecting with folks in the neighborhood to, just let them know that the change of ownership has happened. Here's what our rules and regulations are. Certainly, there's a lot of dog walking that happens there that's going to be able to continue. So.
Great.
No real change, I think, from the perspective of the residents, other than that the main access trail is going to move.
Great.
Did I understand that also there would be in the future perhaps some opportunity for people paddling on the river to access this that way, a landing or, again, an informal landing or something?
Yeah, one of the things that the developer agreed to do as part of the subdivision is basically to build a sort of informal canoe kayak launch on the property. There's a spot that really lends itself to that. That's down low, close to the river. So similarly, I think if somebody was coming down the river, wanted to pull up and picnic, they could do that. Or paddle up from Sudbury Road and stop and then paddle back.
Nice.
Yes.
Kathy, I'm not sure I'm reading the map right. The right of way that I see slicing from the northeast to the southwest, is that Track Road or is it some other
That's
easement?
the honey pot, I think.
That is the part of the old Assabet River line that's owned by Honey Pot. On the east side of the river, and then on the west side of the river, it's owned by other private parties.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting. So it actually, it goes through this parcel. They still own that rail bed.
They are not deeding that part though, obviously, because they don't own the fee interest.
Right. Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Megan, any questions? Okay, good. All right, well then I'll take a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to accept and sign the open space deed for the Joanne Drive Subdivision as presented at this meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Great, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
And I see Lori is here, so we'll go back to the MBA and there's numerous, sorry, not just Lori, now I'm seeing, there's Meg, there's Jesse, there's a bunch of maybe everybody on the planning board. Hi, everybody.
I think they were.
You were just
pausing
waiting
to come
for us.
here.
I know,
Yeah,
you couldn't
thank you.
wait to meet with us, I know. So, thank you all. I'm assuming I'm letting you guys take the lead on this. You know it better than we do. So Lori, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Right, so the main topic tonight for the joint meeting is really to help educate everyone on the state proposal for MBTA Community, which has lots of challenges for Stow. But part of that requirement is that the select board get a specific presentation on that, and that's what we're here to fulfill tonight. And I believe Jesse and Malcolm have actually worked that up to take us all through.
Okay.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, everybody. In fact, if you could allow Malcolm to share his screen, he was going to take us through the presentation. There we go.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Malcolm Reagan. I'm the Assistant Town Planner here in Stow. Today, I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of some of the requirements. The new multifamily zoning requirements are part of what is known as the MBTA Communities Act commonly. So let's, I guess, just get started then. So we'll start off with some really key takeaways that I think this board and the rest of Stow needs to know about these requirements. This covers a substantial amount of the communities, or pretty much all the communities in Metro Boston. It requires the development of a zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right. So that means that there cannot be discretionary permitting, which means special permits through the planning board or other land use boards. That still allows for things like site plan review and all that, but I'll get into that in a second. It must allow for the zoning must allow for a gross density of 15 units per acre. There are some other caveats to go with that, which I'll also get into. An important takeaway also is that compliance with this is not optional. Not adhering to these requirements and developing a district would disqualify Stow from substantial infrastructure funding available through the state. As well, this is a point of contention whether this will make it into final guidelines, but DHCD has suggested they would consider non-compliance in many other grant applications as well. So it's likely that a substantial amount of state funding would basically be switched off for Stow if it does not comply with this. There are a few interim compliance steps we need to make. This is one of them, this presentation. Another one is the submission of a short community information form to the state by May 2nd. After this presentation, that is something the planning department will be able to handle. Before we get really into the weeds here, I just want to make it clear that all the information you'll see presented tonight is available via mass.gov/MBTA communities. That includes draft guidelines and includes an FAQ document, webinars that DHCD has provided, as well as the actual text of the legislation and some other technical assistance kind of resources that the state will be offering. So with that, I'll get into a little more the weeds on this. A first question many people have certainly asked us since these guidelines came out is Stow an MBTA community? And the answer is yes. This is not an exercise that would be opting into being an MBTA community or anything like that. Stow has already been designated as such in Mass General Law, Chapter 161A. It includes all the communities you see on this map here, which is a good chunk of the eastern half of the state, really. Basically, this is defined as communities with MBTA service of some kind, or communities that are adjacent to communities with commuter rail service. So with that, I'll get into a little bit of I won't read through this whole thing, but to give you an idea of what the legislation that created this requirement actually says. Well, these MBTA communities must have one of these districts, which allows multifamily housing by right, as I said earlier. That housing must be offered without age restrictions and shall be suitable for families with children. And for the purposes of that legislation, minimum gross density, as I said, must be 15 units per acre, subject to further limitations placed by Title V, which is basically septic requirements for the state. Another requirement is that, if applicable, the district be located within half a mile of commuter rail station. It's important to note that for Stow, that no part of Stow is within half a mile of South Acton commuter rail station. This means that we have a little bit more leeway in designing this district and locating it somewhere. So getting further into the legislation there, the consequences of this, there are three particular funding sources that Stow would become ineligible for if it does not create one of these districts. However, as I've mentioned before, the Department of Housing and Community Development has stated they would consider noncompliance as part of other grant applications as well. So it's very possible this list may be expanded as time goes on. So at present, the Department of Housing and Community Development is working on developing guidelines for implementation of these requirements created by the aforementioned legislation. The first draft guidelines were issued in December. DHCD took comment on these guidelines running through the end of March here. The Stow Planning Board, as well as many other nearby communities, have submitted comments already to this. And it's not exactly clear when the final guidelines are due to be issued, but we're hoping sometime in the next few months here we'll have like final guidelines. So with that out of the way, I'll get into a little bit more of the weeds of the technical requirements for this. The reasonable size requirement was not defined in the legislation. DHCD has chosen a size of 50 acres as the reasonable size, with that minimum gross density of 15 units per acre, as I've said. Overall, though, the capacity of units that need to be possible to be built in this district is a function of both the kind of community you're looking at, so whether that be a community served by proper rapid transit, bus lines, commuter rail, or communities like Stow, which are nearly adjacent to communities with commuter rail service. That percentage is based on that categorization there. For Stow, that's 10% of existing units as of the 2020 decennial census count. There were 2,770 units according to that count, so that would mean 277 units would be required according to the legislation. It would seem, unfortunately, the twin requirements of having the reasonable size of 50 acres and that minimum gross density of 15 units an acre means that the actual floor capacity is 750, not the 277 that would otherwise be a calculation for Stow. This is true for any and all communities affected by the MBTA Community's legislation, that the unit floor for capacity appears at the moment to be 750 units.
Malcolm, can you just walk us through that calculation?
Sure, yeah, so I'll kind of go left to right here. I kind of skipped over some things here. So going back to the other slide here, the unit capacity of these districts is meant to be a function of the current housing stock, at least as of 2020. In Stow, that's 2,770 units in the 2020 census count. Now, being an MBTA adjacent community without our own service, that would mean that the unit capacity would be 10% of that, or 277 units, it would seem. But it's because that the requirement is the district be reasonable size and the minimum gross density, that the actual practical floor ends up being 750, regardless of whether that is well above that 10% number. That means that basically an MBTA adjacent community like Stow, a community that's next to one with commuter rail service, would have to have 7,500 units in 2020 to basically for that percentage calculation to even have an impact on the unit capacity. The floor appears like at the moment that it will be 750 for basically any community that's adjacent to commuter rail service. We'll get into it a bit later, but this is probably the most frequently pointed to issue that communities have raised with the draft guidelines as they currently exist.
Great, thank you.
So, as I mentioned earlier, there is no part of Stow that is within half a mile of South Acton Station. The legislation and the draft guidelines have accounted for this. The exact text of what it states is in the second bullet point here. DHCD has been relatively vague about this to date. It does appear that they are required to review proposed locations to verify that as they see it, it meets what they call the Commonwealth Sustainable Development Principles, meaning near an existing downtown or a village center or an area of otherwise concentrated development. Something I think that's missing from that is areas with sufficient infrastructure to support any new housing. So that's a general outline of some of the technical requirements here. The timeline for compliance with this is relatively tight. As I mentioned, started off in December. DHCD issued the preliminary guidance, received public comment on that through March 31st. Some of you may have seen the front page of the Boston Globe on Sunday was actually about the comments they'd received from many such communities, a lot of them like Stow. So they've received a lot of correspondence and comment on the draft guidelines. The next requirement is one I mentioned earlier, which is the MBTA Community Information Form. That is something that we handle at a staff level. That's basically just telling DHCD what our zoning currently allows, how it does not comply with these requirements, what kind of transit service exists in and around Stow, and basically, verifying that we've provided this presentation to you tonight. The next action item, or next time compliance item we need to think about is development of an action plan, as DHCD calls it, by the end of this calendar year. What is included in the action plan is still relatively, from what I've seen, not super well defined. It's likely that will be given more specificity in the final guidelines that come out. But it doesn't appear that it will be a huge lift, and it may just be sort of a roadmap for public engagement, design, anything that might go along with this. DHCD is required to provide an approval or disapproval of that action plan by July 1st of the following year. And then actual implementation of the zoning district is required by the end of 2024, at the end of this timeline here. An important thing to note, actually, that I forgot to put into this presentation, I apologize for that, is that this, as part of the legislation that created this new requirement, the voting threshold for creating this district at town meeting will be a simple majority now, and no longer a 2/3 majority, as well as several other types of zoning amendments, such as basically things that would allow multifamily housing or increased densities are now subject to simple majority votes at town meeting instead of the 2/3. So that's a lot of information. An important thing to know about these guidelines and this legislation is what does not do. This does not a production mandate. So DHCD is not interested in whether units in these districts actually are constructed or how many exactly. The requirement is simply that the zoning by right allow construction to the density they would like. It also has nothing to do with Chapter 40B or comprehensive permits. The units that can be developed as part of this can absolutely count toward the subsidized housing inventory, the 10% number we often hear about for Chapter 40B. But basically, there is no, the 40B process has nothing to do with this. And so basically allowing a 40B to happen in a district is not sufficient to have the by right zoning requirement. And it also does not prohibit communities from requiring site plan review and other basically design review stages as part of permitting for this. So the discretionary permit is not allowed. The special permit where the use is actually in question, the use will be allowed. But local planning and zoning board still have the right to place conditions on development, ensure safe site access and circulation, landscaping requirements, some architectural design features, and things of that nature. So those powers are still left intact for local authorities. As I mentioned before, DHCD has received a lot of comments on these draft guidelines already. Sort of the main two that we've so frequently heard are summarized here. As I said, that reasonable size requirement, creating that floor 750 units, has been the most frequently cited issue raised with these draft guidelines. In particular, the Mass Municipal Lawyers Association has penned a lengthy letter arguing against this requirement, saying that it is against the intent of the legislation and outside its allowances. And also, I mean, frankly, I think the DHCD would have a difficult time arguing that it supports their goal of developing housing, relatively speaking, where existing transit nodes are. If you're mandating 750 units in communities with a smaller existing existing housing stock, then you're essentially mandating sprawl, proportionally speaking. So this is something that has been commented on a lot. The other one is the density requirement. The legislation seems to say very clear, the minimum gross density of 15 units an acre is subject to further limitations placed by environmental considerations, particularly wetlands and septic and well and septic limitations through Title V. The draft guidelines seem to imply instead that the actual existing gross density possible needs to be 15 units an acre, which in the case of Stow, without town sewer water, is theoretically even impossible, not just practically. That is something that's another one that's been commented on extensively. And the other part of that is there's an apparent requirement for communities to assess in the new district the development capacity of each individual parcel based on well and septic constraints. That is an odd thing to see that onus fall on the local officials rather than the developers. It's also generally difficult to estimate that without on the ground testing. Basically, it's not clear that with just space, land data, that we can accurately estimate the development capacity of individual parcels. So those are probably the most frequent issues that have been raised so far. So just, I guess, bringing it all back. These are really the key takeaways for this board and the planning board as well, I suppose. Just remembering this is zoning district to allow multifamily by right, so no discretionary review on that, although a design review is still possible. 15 units an acre, subject to clarifications possibly in the final guidelines. Non-compliance means significant funding being switched off. And there's a handful of steps we will need to be taking by this calendar year to maintain access to MassWorks and other grant funding that is likely going to be very important for some of the infrastructure projects we're in the planning stages for. So with that, there's more information available. Like I've said, all this information and much more can be found on mass.gov/MBTA communities. You can find the draft guidelines there, a quick handout on how to comply this year. Technical assistance will be made available to affected communities through the Mass Housing Partnership, though it's been a little uncertain what exactly that assistance will comprise. There's a frequently asked questions document. There's also a recording to a presentation provided by the Department of Housing and Community Development regarding these guidelines. And that is the end of my presentation. And I think with that, we should just open up to questions.
Well, it just sounds like just a series of not good things or almost impossible for us to comply with it, even if we
just
wanted.
completely out of scale.
Yeah.
And really no clear path to be able to comply.
Right.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, this is obviously highly speculative, but does Lower Village have 50 acres in it that would perhaps take an overlay like this? It seems to me with linear side of the road and the whole south side that maybe there's 50 acres there.
I mean, right now Lower Village is not residential, and frankly, making it residential, other than mixed use, it goes completely against what we've set out as goals.
I was thinking mixed use.
Essentially, if you make it and it could actually be built, then essentially we would have no business district.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if it were a
This
mixed
is the
use.
question directly. Lower Village is close to 50 acres, might be a little larger than that even. And just specifically, mixed use is a way to comply with these requirements. So the zoning district does not only have to allow residential development; it can allow mixed use.
I think the concern is really the density that you would need to hit would basically essentially take away the retail.
Right.
Got it.
Right. And again, with the restriction or the issue around, a half a mile away from South Acton and that's not even a possibility, is then the only, I mean, I guess it sounds like the language says, well, if it can't be that, then it should be in your quote business district, which is also pretty small for us. So would they still then say, well, then find a place to put it? I mean, is there, it doesn't, like
I think
South
it's,
Acton Road or something.
my impression is that the location, given that none of our properties are half mile away, to me, there's probably flexibility there. That's probably the least of our problems.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. The legislation reads that it's areas with, they call it reasonable access to a transit station based on existing street patterns, pedestrian connections, bicycle lanes, or in an area that otherwise consistent with sustainable development principles. So yeah, I think there's quite a bit of flexibility there for location.
Can I ask another question?
Go.
I'm just
Jim has a question.
brainstorming. It seems to me that from my reading of the materials that you gave us that we're allowed to overlay an existing development that is either built or could be built out.
It is true in the sense that I think to Malcolm, as he pointed out, was it doesn't necessarily, they're not so worried about building it or mandating production, they just simply want you to create the zone.
So if we were to make an overlay on the developed area that's proposed for Stow Acres, it's fairly close to a bike trail. And the streets, you can certainly go by street to the MBTA station the way people do nowadays anyway.
So what is the density for Stow Acres though? Is it?
It's not 700.
But I think
Yeah.
I think the point is that's a moot point, meaning
Right, that's
if
true,
you basically
yeah.
create the district in a district
Yeah.
that's already developed, then
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
It's not
They want to-
entirely a
yeah.
moot point. You do need to be able to, like I said, apparently municipalities are required to demonstrate that a parcel contained in the district has the potential for 15 units an acre gross density. So, like I said, subject to Title V requirements and whatnot. So I think there would still need to be some work done there to show the possible, like theoretical development density possible. But like I said, it's unclear if that requirement is really destined to stay in the guidelines.
We don't,
Jim,
sorry, I'll shut up.
Jim, you had a question, go ahead,
Well,
or comment.
I think I want to start off and just say that, Malcolm, your presentation was far clearer than the state's materials, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And to the planning board, I want to say, I understand why you're bringing this forward, considering the grants that could potentially be lost. Mass Works has been very good to this town. All that being said, I find myself extremely frustrated with this. We were just talking about Laura Spear a while ago, and I remember her talking about zoning reform and saying to a state official that the Commonwealth just cannot dictate dense development requirements to a rural town such as ours without the necessary infrastructure. And this makes that point very, very well. This town has spent so long trying to get to the 10% that 40B requires just to give ourselves more control over the development. And 40B gives you at least a seat at the table, not control, but it gives you a seat at the table. Now, as we see that goal within sight, the state comes up with this new requirement. And all for the privilege of living next to a town that doesn't let us park at its train station.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, I guess there's a possibility that we could put the overlay district elsewhere, but that would just increase opposition to the Stow Acres project. This town has made good efforts, very good efforts, considering its lack of infrastructure, to create this kind of development. And to just have the goalposts moved like this is extremely frustrating. So much so that I honestly am not sure that it is worth the cost. I know how good Mass Works has been to us. But I find this whole subject to be extremely frustrating, or very cynical, that we create a fake district and really it doesn't increase the likelihood of any kind of dense development at all because of water, sewer, and infrastructure problems. In which case, it's just an exercise in futility that will just justifiably tick off a lot of people for no good reason. And I'm not even getting into the issues you're gonna have, or we're gonna have, well, you're gonna have, when you actually propose putting it in a place, you know, then you're really gonna hear some stuff.
I think in general, the planning board over the years has been extremely frustrated with state proposed legislature that really doesn't take into account small towns with lack of infrastructure. I mean, it happened with Clerpa. There's been sort of a series of state proposed things that really doesn't consider, it's almost like they can't fathom a town like Stow that at the scale or the lack of infrastructure, it just doesn't even enter their mind.
And what do you, so I read the Globe article, and lots of complaints and lots of, I mean, from all size towns, really. I mean, it seemed like the concerns range from bigger towns. I don't know if Boston has its own zoning, so they don't have to get affected by it, which I love that. But what's your sense? Is there, I mean, when the final guidelines come out, I mean, I assume they're not gonna be that different. I mean, they have to do clarification on this, I can't remember what the size, what the parcel size is, but I would think anyway. But do you have any other sense of what they might be giving on?
The HCD has been very tight-lipped
Yeah.
about what they plan to do with the public comment they have received to date. Based only on the letter penned by the Mass Municipal Lawyers Association, I mean, they were very careful to really emphasize the density, the requirement that creates the floor of 750 units,
Yeah.
as well as the density requirements being subject to further limitations by Title V limitations. I can't say I predict those to change. I certainly hope they do.
Yeah. Because I mean, so at this point, I mean, you all wrote a letter, which I was trying to remember if we saw that in correspondence, it might be helpful just to know what you all said, but I'm just wondering if there's anything further we can do. I mean, if we talk to Senator Eldridge or Representative Hogan, I mean, I know it's DHCD is doing the regulating, but I don't know if is there any value in that? From what
It wouldn't hurt, it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly aware. We spoke with Senator Eldridge today on a housing meeting for our regional housing consortium. He's very well aware of the opposition here. Frankly, I think it caught a little bit of the legislative delegation off guard to see the kind of response they received from the communities. I think their intentions were in the right place, trying to address a housing crisis, and I just didn't think this is a very complicated thing. It's why comprehensive zoning reform never got done until this kind of just went through and everybody was like, hey, what was that just got passed?
Right.
So I think there's everybody is well aware. It could, like Karen said, it couldn't hurt to continue to reach out. We did copy, I believe, our own delegation on the letter that the planning board sent out.
Okay.
And we, our letter would say the things that are probably going through your mind right now.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear what our challenges are.
Right.
I mean, wouldn't 15 units an acre even exceed our height limits because we don't have a ladder truck that'll go to a certain height building? I mean, I'm trying to visualize 15 units per acre with
Right.
water treatment, septic treatment.
You'd have to have a package treatment plant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably would. It would probably be difficult to do that on a two-story building, two-story basis. When you start looking at other examples from around the community, I think Regency at Stow was almost 2-point-something units per acre. If Stow Acres were to be built as shown, you're looking at 2.9 units per acre. 15 is a difference of degree for sure.
Yeah.
There is case law that 40B developments can override any town's height limit. So we're already subject to having our height limit overridden by some 40B development.
Yeah, and that came up at Villages when they originally proposed 3-story structures. But that's where 40B differs from what I'm hearing here. 40B brings the town and the neighbors even to the table. And you can argue with them. And in Villages, the proposal went from, these numbers are probably wrong, 150 units to 90 something, and they eliminated the 3-story structures, and the highest they went was 2 stories. I don't even detect the opportunity to have that sort of a discussion in this process.
Right.
No, I would agree. Under 40B, that is one of the items that the town can push back on as height requirements and apparatus to address that with firefighting. I've dealt with that in my last 2 communities that we had to bring DHCD into those conversations because it just was not feasible. A lot of times, actually, developers will then in turn purchase a ladder truck to get around that, but that is one of the items that you can push back on. But I would agree, I don't see anywhere in this legislation that gives us that kind of voice or say in the matter.
Does the developer then endow the town for the next ladder truck?
Yeah.
Can I just throw something out?
Sure.
I know I'm the new person, so I might not have all the info. But since this could theoretically just be something on paper, could we make a zone to be the Stowaway Golf Course? Which does have the acreage and is near the lower village. But we don't actually have to build these units, but we could have a place to say this covers the land requirements.
I think the owners of Stowaway may have a problem with that.
Right.
Well,
Besides that.
maybe they won't if they want to sell, I don't know. But, you know.
Right, but in
someplace.
theory, we don't have to own the land that we rezone. But,
Correct.
but, I mean, if that's what they require, it's, but I
Yeah, I
can't
mean, we're
imagine.
not gonna own 50 acres somewhere that's not in conservation already.
But I think there are still some issues. I mean, this happened years ago when communities had to have adult entertainment districts, and so many communities made them like the quarries
Yeah.
and places where they could never go, and the state stepped in and said, you just can't do that. I mean, I would think that with this, it's gonna have to be a reasonable parcel that it could potentially be built there, that they will not allow us to just randomly pick parcels where it would never have a chance to be built.
Well, let me ask something.
That's
Maybe
right,
this is
yep.
Maybe this is a stupid question. Why would it just be on paper? I don't see a requirement here that the units be affordable. So a developer could say, sure, 750 market rate units, I'll build a package treatment plant for that, you bet I will. I'll build a little sewer. I'll have plenty of money to do that. Why are we talking about it like, you know, like this won't happen?
Especially since it's by right.
Exactly.
Right.
Should be noted that the Stow's affordable housing, inclusionary housing bylaw that requires a 10% affordable units in development like that is still applicable here. This legislation does not prevent communities from enforcing those bylaw restrictions. So it wouldn't be 750 market rate units, it'd be however many that minus 75.
675 plus 75 affordable.
Okay, I mean, it's, point stands though, you know, it's just, I don't know, I'm not sure what their end game is on this whole thing, and I think it's dangerous to think that it's just a cynical ploy. I think from what I hear, this actually could happen.
Well, no, I mean, I think it is, as I think Malcolm said, I mean, their intention was because we have a crisis of housing, right?
Right.
Across Eastern Mass at least, and, you know, they thought this was a good solution. It
But-
forced us to do things, except for they weren't thinking it through.
Agreed, but do we have a critical shortage of $1.5 million condos?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't aware of that.
Apparently.
Apparently we do.
If you wanna live that close to your neighbor for $1 million condo, you know,
People do
yeah,
it, people do it.
I guess.
I mean, some concern too is with that many more units, I mean, there's other impacts on the
huge,
town.
Right, I mean, that's, yeah,
Right.
Yes, actually, if I put a third bullet point in there for frequent issues raised, that would have been that is the impacts to local school districts,
right.
emergency services, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's been frequently cited, yeah.
You have a raised hand.
Oh, we do,
Yes, Kathy Sferra.
Kathy, go
So,
ahead.
just speaking for myself, I'm just biting my tongue here, but I have to reflect on all of the work and all of the financial resources that the state put into working with communities to do build-out analyses a number of years ago, so that they would really understand how many units could be allowed under zoning and plan for them and provide the water and the other infrastructure. And now I feel like this new legislation just blows all of that out of the water.
Right. Just completely ignored it all.
You know, and also ignores all the work that the town is doing to create affordable housing, like Stow Acres, like the revision to the AAN bylaw, where we're actually getting units, not just doing a paper exercise.
Right.
Those comments should be part of our action plan, because I think that kind of pushback ought to just be part of that conversation. And it's reasonable.
So really, I guess, at this point, I mean, we could decide we wanna write a letter to further our opposition to this, but otherwise, we're waiting to hear what the final regulations are, is that right? I mean,
Right.
we don't have to make any more decisions, or,
And certainly based on the timeline, I'm assuming the timeline won't necessarily change, whatever the final is. I think we'll have to put our heads together. I mean, I think certainly the planning board will be brainstorming about, once we get the final, what our options are.
right.
I had a question, Jesse, did you include this, letter that the, Mass Municipal Lawyers wrote? Did you include that to the select board?
I don't think so.
I don't know if we included that. There was so much that we sent. I can't recall if Malcolm and I pulled that. But either way, it was provided to the select board now.
No.
Okay.
Excellent letter.
Yeah.
Yes, it was, and every single point that Stowe needs to cover is covered in there, and it's all set in legalese. So it made me feel so much better about this legislation, because a lot of the things I think that they're saying is illegal, what they want to do in this, proposed, or the law that, whatever it is. So this document you should read before you write any letter, and you should maybe echo what they say.
Okay,
I'm happy to share it with Joyce or Denise
Yes.
to
Great.
distribute.
that would be great. And also the letter that, and it could be in our correspondence from the past, when you sent in your comments back in March or whenever. I don't know if we got it, but if you could just forward those along, just so we have them again, that would be helpful.
Sounds good.
Be great.
Well, that's a bummer, but thank you for updating us.
No, and now we feel just a little better that we're not the only ones worried about it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's, yes. I mean, this is a joint problem for sure.
Thanks for getting my blood pressure up.
Yeah, anything else? I mean, I think, I do feel like we should, even if it's a short letter to say, hey, we're behind this lawyer's letter, we'd like to complain to our representatives, and we can write DHCD, I guess, to back up you guys. I mean, you've already submitted your comments, but it does seem like.
I mean, I think the idea in itself, on a very high level, is not terrible. It's just not well implemented. I mean, especially, that 750 units is just.
Right.
Really.
It's ridiculous.
There's a scope issue here.
So reasonable size, I was reading the description of reasonable size. You could work with reasonable size. It's pretty amorphous. If we're allowed to come up with reasonable size.
Yeah.
And we could even do the 15 units per acre, which would be tough, but when you just jam the whole 750 down our throats, it's kind of like.
I mean, I think it says something that it's so out of scale that we would make a statement like, okay, well, let's consider what happens if we don't do it, because I'm not even sure we can.
Right.
It's not to drag this conversation out, but it makes me think about, I've done some work in Acton lately, and you guys are probably very aware that Acton they may have 15 different residential designations or something. And so there's a lot of variety in the density there. And I just find that interesting. I'll just say that. I just find it interesting, and it could be a useful tool. That just having one residential definition is not perhaps the way we need to think about stuff. There may be a way to say, well, in the, where linear is, maybe we just stack a bunch of, stack an apartment building on top of it, and it's already kind of ugly, so maybe we plant some really nice trees. I mean, I'm making it up, obviously, but, like maybe there's a way to spot things around where there is some way to have our own version of this that makes sense.
It's just the idea that, if that's the only 50 acres, I mean, otherwise we're looking at conservation land or something. I mean, we just don't have 50 acres.
No.
And that we don't own either. I mean, just like Stowaway, we don't own Stowaway, so, Sure.
Just to clarify, the 50 acre requirement does not have to be undeveloped land.
but I can imagine, I think it was Jim who brought up the resistance you'd expect, I think, from any currently developed neighborhood.
Right.
Well, that's why I was picking linear, because we never hear
Right,
from
'cause-
them anywhere,
right.
and they're not nice to us.
They're gonna be less nice to us if they hear.
That's
anyway.
true,
Yeah.
that's right.
All right, well, I guess, I think there's, unless you guys have anything more, thank you for, Malcolm, again, a great presentation. That was much more clear than reading the THCD document, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Alright.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks for
Thank you.
joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Good
it.
night.
And I would
Okay,
encourage the board members to, once you get a copy of the letters, feel free to reach out to those that you may be friendly with in the state delegation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily be a letter, that you can maybe have more of an impact on a phone call or a meeting.
Great. Yeah, we can decide maybe at the next meeting if we actually wanna write a letter together. We can put that on the agenda but in the meantime, feel free, so if we can get the.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's gonna be too, that's why, if the deadline is May 2nd to notify the boards, I don't know if they'll be coming out with their guidelines sooner than that,
Right,
so.
okay. Okay, so next is to discuss with Kathy, the town's MVP grant submission for Stow Acres. I love that it's the MVP grant. So yes, Eric, all yours, Kath.
Thanks, Kathy Sferra, Conservation Director. You have in your packet a letter of support, which Denise and I put together for the town's grant application to the state's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. That grant application is due next week. It has been a labor of love. And we are going to be seeking two things. The first is year one funding for the acquisition of the portion of the North Course that town meeting voted to buy last fall. So if you recall, we appropriated $2.5 million in CPA funds, with the rest to be found from other sources. This grant is the grant that we're looking to for the bulk of that purchase price. And then Stow Conservation Trust has committed to raising some funds that will also make up the difference. So if we are successful, we will have the funds that we need to purchase the property. And then in the second year, we are asking the MVP program for additional funding, probably somewhere around $175,000 to $200,000 to do a climate resilience master plan for the property. And I think part of our pitch to them is if they're going to help fund the acquisition of the property, we will then do kind of an overarching plan that will serve as a blueprint for the deconstruction of some of the golf uses on the property, the restoration of portions of the property, and then the development of the facilities that the town would have on the property, all under kind of a lens of climate resilience and enhancing habitat and connectivity and all of that. So they have been a little bit nervous about, the idea of having ball fields on the property as something that they view as not resilient. And we pitched them on the idea of saying, let's really look at what you would have to do to make a ball field a more resilient kind of land use, because communities have them. They're going to want to continue to have them. You can use, drought-resistant grasses. You can look at, low water intensity, tree plantings, all kinds of things like that to help make them as resilient as they can be. So we will not hear about the grant probably until August, September. So we'll have a bit of a waiting period, but we've got about a dozen letters of support coming. We've asked both of our legislators. The Green Advisory Committee voted to send a letter. Concom, Reccom, Council on Aging is sending a letter. We've got some letters coming from outside groups like ORS as well. So we are optimistic. They understand the project. I think they're excited about it, as are we, but we just don't know what our competition will be.
And is this request for both year one and year two? I mean, the combined
Yes.
funds, you're asking all at once, you don't have to wait till next year to apply for the second?
Right.
Okay.
So we would know from the outset if we have the full amount.
I'm just gonna jump in, one of my questions on the recreation, I mean, we don't necessarily say it's ball fields, right? I mean, there's gonna be that master plan, or is that what we were referring to it as, master plan for recreation?
Yeah, we would be doing a full master plan, but the assumption is that there will be some type of recreational field.
Right, well, I think of like disc golfing, which is a
Right.
favorite in my family, doesn't require fields. in the
Right,
same
well,
way.
and we've talked about that, and we are committed to looking at sort of environmentally friendly recreational activities like disc golf, or if there are other, trails that include like a workout component as you go through, things like that, that we can work into it. We did reach out to NASDA to see if we could get their assistance in bringing some diversity to our master planning process, if they would be interested in helping us come up with some creative ideas as well. So we really want to cover, obviously, the conservation part, and we want the recreation piece to be more than just a ball field. We want it to include different components that both fit the needs of the community through master planning, but also could be creative and environmentally friendly at the same time.
One thing I'll add is that the program really values kind of community engagement and involvement in projects that they fund. So we have put together a fairly elaborate community engagement process, a lot of staff time, also some consultant time. So there'll be site visits, there'll be a virtual site visit that Stow TV is going to help us with. There'll be opportunities for kind of at-home engagement for people who aren't, I don't want to come to a meeting and sit in a group and offer my opinion, but I want to just sit at home and comment. We're going to look to engage the seniors in particular through a forum at the COA, through the senior newsletter. So there are a number of things. We're talking about doing a day where folks are out on the land, identifying species, identifying plants. If people know, there's a thing called the BioBlitz that the state used to do. Get them to take pictures of themselves out there, take pictures of their favorite places, really, begin to try to get people engaged with the property.
Right, and we do, Kathy mentioned some of the groups. I mean, we plan to expand. We've talked about reaching out to the schools and the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and figuring out all the different groups in town and all the different ages and demographics and how to really get them involved in the planning process. So as Kathy mentioned, it's several pages of the application of ideas that we have of marketing it, collecting data, disseminating it, presenting it. We want to make it as thorough as possible with the public outreach.
And so the hope is at the end of this process that we will have a plan that really is the blueprint for what the town will do there, and then we can start to approach that in chunks as we have the funding, as the land is available to us, and have it be something that makes sense as a whole. So
yes,
that's where we are.
So in the 60s, when they built, or 70s, when they built Pompano Elementary School, and they built fields next to it, in between a school and a river. Obviously, no one was really considering vulnerability and resiliency. And I do think that it's short-sighted on the part of the state to say automatically, oh, resiliency means undeveloped, means no recreation fields, because as long as, if municipalities continue to build outdoor recreation facilities into the 21st century, and I hope that they will, then clearly they're going to have to start considering resiliency more than was done in the past. And for the state to just say, no, we're not going to fund that kind of thinking is extremely short-sighted.
And I will say, I think, the initial conversation, they really didn't know what to make of the project. And then Kathy had a one-on-one with our representative for the grant, and, really impressed upon the fact that we can't look at just one piece of this, that we're really talking about the entire parcel. We're talking about the affordable housing piece. We're talking about conservation and recreation. And it wasn't fair, quite frankly, to our project to only look at the conservation area, because it is so much more than that. And the fact that we're working with the current owner of the property, we're working with the developer, that we really have this vision of the property to, all work hand in hand. And I think, and through Kathy's conversations with them, they have now understood that And that's why there is excitement on their part to see what we put forward. Because initially they were just zoning in on the conservation piece and not the whole parcel itself. And really, we really do feel that it is about the whole parcel, because even with the development pod, they are allowing us to use some of that land in our restoration projects, and it all works hand in hand. The fact that they'll have trails, they'll be interwoven with our trails, there'll be recreational spots for people of all ages. So it really is bigger than just restoring wetlands and conservation. It's the whole property.
Yeah, that's a great point, Denise. So the resilient master plan will include the Stow Acres parcel. It include about 20 acres of the development parcel at the rear that abuts Elizabeth Brook. And it will also include a 12-acre parcel that the Conservation Commission already owns that abuts Stow Acres, and that really isn't currently used for anything. So we'll incorporate that into the planning effort.
Cool.
Nice.
Any other questions or comments? No. Megan, any comments, questions?
Nope, I don't. This is exciting.
Yeah. Great. If there's no other comments or questions, I'll take a motion for the letter.
Madam Chair, I move to approve and authorize the chair to sign the letter of support for the Stow Acres Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness MVP Action Grant proposal as presented by the Conservation Director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye, that is unanimous. Great, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Great work.
Yeah.
All right, now we get to our town meeting warrant. I'll ask if there's any questions or comments on anything or edits, whatever, but we had discussed whether we wanted to have, there's probably several articles we want to vote on. The only question is whether we want to vote tonight in order to have it in the printed warrant, or we don't have to do that to ourselves and we can do it at the next meeting. So, yes.
So I just wanted to comment, the
Yeah.
printed copy you have in front of you is what would be the final version. I received town council's comments back last night, received the FinCom report. So this is now the fully incorporated warrant, which once it's approved, it'll be posted in the morning. But there were very few changes. The only changes they really made, they took some language out that is no longer needed in articles like the library project. Some of the borrowing language is not required any longer. But otherwise, there are no changes to the version that you saw previously.
Okay.
And I would say that since you had the last one, so capital planning has taken their votes. And I don't know if the FinCom votes were in your prior warrant, but they are all incorporated in these as well.
Yep. Yeah, we didn't have, on the last draft that I could find, it didn't have that, so that's great. So I guess that's my first just general question. Do we wanna consider taking votes tonight to have them included in the warrant? I think the norm has been that they aren't included, if I recall correctly, that we bring them up at town meeting if we don't necessarily vote on every article, we vote on the ones we think are important, and but given that we have this opportunity to add one more thing to this draft, if we wanna do that to Denise, we could.
So I would just ask, have you thought about the format of town meeting, so far as to think about that aspect of it? I remember town meetings where, the reading of the articles passed from one select board member to another and the microphone passed around and we, maybe the recommendation came as with the reading of the article, I'm not sure, and we've also had meetings where, so last year, the chair read the articles. Is that, I guess in my thinking, two things. One is, it might be useful to the taxpayer, to the citizens to see the recommendations if they're reading the warrant ahead of time. I don't also find that it's unreasonable to withhold that and say it at the town meeting, just curious.
So, I mean, my personal feeling is just that, that I would prefer to have as much information out there to our residents and voters to review ahead of time. I personally don't think it's fair that they should have to wait till town meeting floor to figure out how a board feels about an article, because it may impact the way they vote. That being said, I wouldn't expect every article to be read. I would expect an early request to waive the reading of the articles, but and the way that the articles are written now, there are no formal motions that need to be read unless someone were to change something. The way that they're all written, the article can just be moved as written. So that takes a lot off the table of what actually needs to be said on town meeting floor.
Right. And I can say that in the future, and possibly at this town meeting, the moderator probably isn't gonna want the select, whoever's making the motion to also say, and the select board makes a recommendation. But the moderator is going to try to be, when there is a select board recommendation, to call on FinCom first, possibly capital planning. No, I'm gonna call on capital planning first on capital items, FinCom first, and then select board, like a separate one. So, but won't be looking for the recommendation with the motion.
Right, and quite frankly, if they're all in here, the moderator would not need to call on the boards, because as it's being, Article 2, FinCom recommends approval, capital planning recommends approval, like the moderator could say that in presenting the article number. And you wouldn't necessarily have to have somebody get up from capital planning on each of those articles, or the select board or FinCom, because it's already here and they've already taken all of those votes.
That's a good point.
So I
They
guess,
might still do it for the FinCom just because it's in the charter that they have to say.
But they have.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
They've made their recommendations. My understanding is no member of the FinCom is expecting to speak, except for one article that they needed additional information on before they made their recommendation. They've made all of their recommendations.
Well, and usually, I'm looking, capital planning has more to say, they'll
He'll
have
do his report.
right, but they usually do it as part of their, the process of voting to say why they recommended it, in context of they ask for it every year, or that they've been planning on this or whatever. So a little more than just a yes or no, whereas finance committee is just yes or no.
And I've noticed when I've been watching town meetings, the FinCom comes across a little road, when they just keep
Yes.
saying, FinCom recommends approval, FinCom, and capital planning comes across a little bit more credible, just because you have a sentence or two to say. So I would recommend that when we go through, and I have quite a list, if we don't think we have a sentence or two to say about something, let's just not say it. It's my recommendation. I'm off the board in 3 weeks. But for what it's worth, I would say, don't even bother if you don't have a sentence or two to say.
Well, and finance committee is required
Right.
ridiculously to comment on every one, even if there's nothing financial about it, but that's state charter, right? So they don't have a choice, but in any case, okay, so, I agree that the sooner we can get it out, the better, but it doesn't mean, the newspaper and Stow TV records everything, we still have time at the next meeting to make sure that the public hears that we've taken a vote. That said, I only thought that there was 3 or 4 articles that I would be asking us to take a vote on, but you had more than that, Jim?
Just suggestion, yeah, they did.
Okay.
so I'm fine with voting on them. I think there are different channels different ways that individuals get information. So I think that some folks, it's useful to be able to read something. Other folks, it's useful to have, even if it was available to read, to have it spoken is more useful to them. And so I think as many channels as we can hit, the more transparency we have.
Yes, that's true.
I wasn't gonna do much else tonight.
Did you have, how many articles did you wanna have us consider tonight or vote on?
I did not have a list.
Okay.
I figured that my colleagues would probably cover it.
Okay, and Megan, your thoughts on sort of?
Sorry, well, I don't know, I'm trying to find the PDF. I only had one that I felt like we definitely needed to vote on.
Okay.
I'm happy to take a vote on any other ones, but there was only one that I felt like, that I really wanted to vote on.
Okay, which one was that?
It's the library.
It's the library, right.
Felt like that was a lot of money, and so
Yeah.
we probably needed to make a recommendation on that.
Right. Yeah, I just had the three, the library, the town hall, and the Red Acre. The SMOT proposal, those are the three I had. I mean,
Sorry,
basically.
Denise, that PDF is like blank.
It is?
I'm gonna pull up another one. Yeah, I don't, it's fine, don't worry about it.
I'll send you
if
the Word
guys can
document.
Or if you guys can just read the Warrant article before we vote on it,
Yeah.
that would be awesome, whatever the ones are that you wanna do.
Yeah, so the numbers haven't changed, so the draft that you have,
Okay.
other than some minor language here and there, has not changed. But I'll
Okay.
send you the Word version.
Maybe I can get it on my phone, I don't know, anyway.
Well, we could also put it up on this. Maybe. That's not the right page.
I can share the screen.
No, I got it.
You got it?
It's my iPad that wasn't working. I got it.
Because it's article, my three were 42, 43, and 44. 44 being the library. Jim, you had those three. So, well, do you wanna, are the ones that the additional ones, are they in some sort of clump of orders, or is it
Yeah.
throughout the?
Why don't we, I think if we go through 42, 43, 44,
Okay,
and then I think 3, 4, and 56 go together. They're the budget articles and the associated personnel administration bylaw change.
okay,
And then I have a couple of scattered ones. Actually, once we get done with that, I have only, I think, 3 others.
for 56. Okay. All right, well, how about if we, start with the library? Because I mean, we did have the presentation from the library director. I think if people had participated in the other presentations they had, people feel pretty knowledgeable about it. I would propose we support the article, and we'll start there and then see other thoughts.
I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that?
Yeah.
I agree,
Yeah.
but I just wanna add that article, which I think is 44, plus the 2 or 3 after it, when you read them together.
Yeah.
The general fund cost is driven down to almost exactly $6 million, which is very significant. I think taking into the cost of inflation, that isn't that much more than the proposal from 11 years ago.
So I will say it's about 6.6 without any additional fundraising. So 6,600,000 is what it would come down to.
Really? I did the math. I thought it was like 6,006,000. Oh, maybe, okay. All right, 6.6 still.
Yeah.
I think it's still. It's $2.2 million in scattered funds before any fundraising.
Right.
Um,
And they're still working on fundraising, and that does that take into account the funds? Yes, cause that includes some of the funds, at least, the Hale High School Fund, the Randall Library, those
Yes,
kind of
the
funds.
trustees.
The
Yep.
trustees funds, okay.
So that would be the $1 million from community preservation, the 900,000 from the 2 trust funds, and then yes, the 2 subsequent articles would reallocate other funds that we have. Article 45
Yeah.
is premium that's on our books from prior borrowing that we have to properly reallocate, so that is 140,000. And then Article 46 is funding that we approved in 2020 to redo the air conditioning unit and the flat roof. That thankfully, because of COVID, we couldn't get anyone to come in, so we have that funding available to reallocate as well.
Great, okay. Megan, thoughts on the library? Well, I think you're probably obvious, but, because you said you wanted to talk about it, but I'm assuming your position on this?
Oh, yeah, I'm a yay on all 4 of those. What is it?
Well, we're just on the library now, on Article 44, 45, and 46, I guess, if we could say.
Yep,
So.
I approve.
So I would, I can't make motions, right? I'm not supposed to make motions.
You can make
You can.
motions.
Can I, so I'll make a motion that we vote to, support Articles 44, 45, 46 related to the renovation of the Randall Library as the select board.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. All right. And then, well, the next, let's see, in order, oh no, we're going to go backwards now. 43, funding support for this town hall restoration. This is one we talked about a fair amount in terms of changing the language. So it's really up to the town administrator. I will note that both the finance committee and capital planning are opposing this article. It is community preservation funds, and they don't, I think we'll hear at town meeting why they are opposing it, but.
Is CPC opposing?
No, no, capital,
Okay.
sorry, did I say that?
No, capital planning.
It is CPC funds,
Yeah.
but no, capital planning and finance committee oppose the,
And Ellen, if I may, Vin
Yes.
is on here and he had his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, Vin, please.
Can you unshare so we can?
He'll come up, do you wanna?
Oh,
I just wanted to mention that if the planning board votes not to support this article, I'm inclined to have it pulled from the warrant.
you mean the select board?
You mean the select board?
The point of the article was to give the planning board funds to, to use if they felt they needed some professional assistance following a joint boards meeting that you folks had talked about. So if you give a nay vote, I'll probably get our committee together and we'll talk about pulling it from the warrant. I don't know if at this point we'd have to do that from the floor, but
So the warrant
That's-
article, Vin, says that the money would go to the town administrator in consultation with community
CPC.
preservation, so I'm sure the planning board will be part of the
No,
joint
I think
boards.
you mean to say the select board, not the planning board, is that right?
Or the town hall committee.
Vin, twice you referred to it as planning board, but I think you meant us, right?
no, I didn't think I said the word planning board in my entire sentence.
Okay, just be clear,
Select
so you
board,
did mean us,
If
yes,
the
okay.
select board chooses,
Yeah.
to not support this, I'm inclined to have us pull it from the warrant.
And it would be too late to pull from the warrant,
Right,
so
it
it
would
would have
just
to
be
be
a no
tabled
action.
on, or,
Right.
yeah.
One question I have for you, Denise, is do you know what funds are in the town hall? What we voted in that hasn't been expended yet?
So I do, so there is, I think right now it's about 18,000, 8,000 is committed. They had committed the additional 10,000, but I have since received an amended proposal from the architect to use that additional 10,000 to no longer produce construction documents, but to produce 5 additional options of what could be done with that building so that it could be discussed at a joint boards meeting. So there's only 10,000 remaining, and the request is to use it to give some other ideas of as little as just basic maintenance and what needs to be updated, all the way to where we are at the full renovation and different iterations of what could be done there.
Well, I'll just start. I'm also opposed to this. I still feel like there's a lot of discussion that has to be done before the architect does anything else about the use of the what we wanna do with the town hall. And I understood from our discussion that it was, funds to put it towards consultants or whatever to help us with that process. I just don't think that we need to spend $50,000 on it. I think 10,000 would be plenty. Having done this for the school building project without any funds, there are smart volunteers in this town who would help organize appropriate public forums. So I think we've spent just too much money going around in circles, and I want us to be clear on what we're gonna spend it on. Doesn't mean I'm opposed to saving the building, I just wanna be clear on that. It's just about how much money we've already spent and we still haven't gotten anywhere on it, so that's my position. I'll let you go next.
I don't see this line of discussion going very far. So I already feel as though we've had these discussions, and I know that the select board is not in favor of moving forward on this project the way it's presented at this time. And I feel as though the efforts to preserve the town hall need to regroup in some way that's not clear at present. So I'm very grateful to the Community Preservation Committee for making the efforts to make this opportunity go and this question to this article to be on the warrant. And I feel as though recent discussions have killed it already, honestly, and that's fine. You know, I just think it just needs to continue to go in its iterative process until, you know, whatever happens next.
Yes.
I mean, clearly defining the use better and finding a metric for support, whether it's financial or just vocal, is of huge importance. And until those things are met, the money, you know, spending money is no, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Jim?
I certainly agree with the idea that it probably needs to go in a different direction. And that the process has to be changed. And what I thought this was trying to kick off was a process led by the town administrator, starting with the joint boards, to really start at square one and re-examine, hopefully, what we could possibly use it for, what might fit in there, ideas, analogous to a period we were at about 9 years ago, when certain building projects brought to town meeting had failed, and we all regrouped, and ultimately came up with a decent idea that resulted in what is now the Pompano Community Center and Fire Station. But from that experience, I know that you need money and you need a consultant, because just basic questions like, well, would it fit to do X, Y, and Z? You can have all the volunteers you want sitting around a room spinning out ideas. Ultimately, you need somebody who really knows what they're doing to match uses with square footage, and that does take money. I hear what you're saying, Madam Chair, about maybe $10,000 is enough. I tend to think $10,000 doesn't get you very far these days. Appropriating 50, not, and I trust Denise not to spend 50 just because she's got 50. But I really think you need, I differ with the plan, with the, with the FinCom and the Capital Planning Committee, in the sense that I think if you're gonna do this effort, you need money. So I'm actually in favor of the $50,000, with the understanding that it is most likely going to go in a different direction, in a town administrator-led effort.
Megan?
Hi, so I do feel, I understand what you're saying, Jim. However, I think having sat on that committee, and Courtney as well, I do feel like the disconnect that I felt was that what was being asked of the architect was to create these plans for this building. And also, they were sort of, it felt like the questions we were asking him were also in a role of a consultant. And so what we have coming out of this is we have, I'm assuming that part of the contract with him was that we got building plans and that we got some kind of documents. And so I feel like a consultant could use, like, that work's been done. I don't want that, and the committee put a ton of work into it. The architect did work. I mean, there's work that has been done. It's just, I don't want to lose all of that. And so, but I also, my frustration is I don't want to throw another $50,000 at it at this point. Like, I think the 10 I would be fine with right now, regrouping with what we have, what we've gotten from the architect, and then take that data and be able to sort of go forward. Like, that's where I'm most comfortable with it, because we did pay money for an architect to come in and do work.
Well, he did work, and he created a lot of
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. He
created
did
a
do that work.
product
I don't want to
that's
lose that.
quite
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want us to be like, we're gonna go out and get a consultant who does whatever. It's like, he designed that based on what the committee was asking. So, like, some of that work has been done. Like, that legwork has happened. So I wouldn't want to lose that. I don't know.
We own all that.
Right. And I think that's what my feeling is that material, all that history over the last several years that has been collected and developed by architects, you know, both specifics and general, we still have that information. So when we start having, you know, we have a facilitated conversation with as many people as we can in town saying, what do we want this very, very unique building to be used for? Because I don't think we've really ever agreed on that. We started letting the architect say, well, if you did this, you'd have to pay for this, and if you did this, we need to say, this is definitively like what we want to do. We look at the stuff that he's already done, saying, you know, do we have the amount of information? I think by putting too much money in it, we're gonna do more of the same. We're gonna be more spinning wheels, as opposed to saying, let's just have the conversation. I mean, it goes back, actually, when you started talking about the Pompo, I was thinking more about the elementary schools, which we had 3 failed town meeting events, votes on it, similar to this. And then we put, Steve Duncan put 15 people in a room and said, work this out, guys. What can you agree on before we hire an architect? And that's what we did. You know, and then, yes, it means another step. I know that was the conversation we had before, is like, well, then we can move along on this. But I feel like we have to really focus on, you know, the incentive here is to get to a point where we can feel a majority of the town supports with how we're gonna use the building. And then we come back to town meeting with a request for money. Or if we need it, I'm presuming that the architect, there will be need for additional work with an architect.
I think we agree on more than we disagree on.
Okay.
But I do suggest a formal vote.
Yeah.
And I'm getting cognizant of the hour.
Yep.
Just so the CPC knows where we stand. I anticipate being in dissent, but, you know, I kind of get what everybody's saying.
We got 4 people.
I think there's more agreement here than disagreement. I believe work flows more freely when there's plenty of money.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's been demonstrated by this project. But, okay, so I'll make the motion that the select board not support Article 43.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Birch McMichael says aye, Sturgis says aye. No, nays?
Nay.
Nay.
Mr. Selby, okay, so we have a split vote, so
Well,
well,
let's try it the other way, just to make sure.
okay,
Just to make sure, I'll move that the select board support Article 43.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And opposed? Nay. Not sure what you were thinking, but
You never know.
it's okay.
You never know.
So Vin, I don't know what that says to you, but you know, I think you guys can discuss it and bring it to town meeting and we can have that discussion.
What it means, to be perfectly fair, and now I'm glad I made that motion, it means that a motion to support this failed.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't know, does it fail when it's a split vote? This is,
Yes.
we got 4
We
people.
said that, we
Yes.
said that
Okay,
last time.
okay,
But I would say a motion to not support it also failed.
I mean, that's the thing, right,
So
so,
wait, why don't we just take no position on it, or,
That's
I
essentially
mean,
what we're doing.
We're doing that, but that leaves Vin in the position that they have to decide whether to pull it from the warrant.
I honestly had a question about how this ended up on, as like a warrant article anyway, cause I swear that we had a conversation like multiple meetings ago. Like, I understand that
But
this is
it's-
not our warrant article, but it's our warrant, like it's the select board's warrant, so in theory, we get to decide
right, but it's
what goes on it.
but it's a CPC article. And when we agreed on the different language about how that 50,000 would be used, that's when we agreed that it would move forward.
Okay,
I'm not sure we can keep something off the warrant if a town board sponsors it. I would have to look at the charter for that.
Isn't there some, well,
Vin has his hand raised.
oh, I'm sorry, Vin,
okay.
I don't have my, sorry, go ahead, Vin, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure the mechanics of this either. I guess, I'm wary of bringing an article to the town meeting that doesn't really have a home, because the CPC is not directing the planning effort on the town hall. And if the select board doesn't feel it needs the $50,000, the way I think we discussed it was the select board would have the town administrator be able to use those funds. And it sounds like if the select board doesn't approve this, then there's nobody to direct there's no applicant, let's put it that way, for this.
Well, it is listed on the
answer that.
warrant as Town Hall Restoration Committee and CPC.
Oh, really?
I mean,
Okay, that's different. See, I don't have the warrant in front of me. Okay, well, we can keep it on and, we'll see where it goes. I mean, you don't have to pull it, but it did seem that I thought that it would be following the joint boards, the select board would, would designate the town administrator on where we're going with this. But if you don't feel like the funds are needed, good. I mean, we can keep it on the warrant and see where it goes.
okay,
Just because the funds were to pass town meeting, just because they're approved for use doesn't mean they have to get used.
Right.
And it does create an opportunity for the town administrator, if she sees a need to, address that after other folks weigh in and continue the process.
all right, let's move on to Red Acre. Article 42 is the SMOT's proposal for Red Acre Road Community Housing. I had a question of the SMOT chair, because the only time I think we really heard about this was last fall, when it was still somewhat early in the process. They hadn't actually gone to CPC to ask for funds yet. So I didn't know if people felt like they even have enough information to vote on it. Courtney's on SMOT. I hear enough about SMOT, but so that's sort of my first question, if people wanna consider it, or if they'd rather not.
Is there a question in there, or?
Yeah, no, do we wanna
What do
take
we
a
want?
position on it? This wasn't, I had it on my list, Jim had it on his list. Megan, I don't know, Megan, you have thoughts? I just don't know where people are at. I know that you know about it, so I'm not too worried about you, Courtney, in terms of whether we vote on, but I guess Megan is one question, if you feel like you have enough information on this to vote on it. Because again, we don't have to do this tonight, we could do it at a subsequent meeting and get more information.
I mean, I feel like this has been going on for what? I don't know, sorry, I'm just rereading it.
That's right.
I mean, when we say that it's this sum, like, what is that sum of money going towards? Is it going towards like, we already have that land, yes?
Right,
Wasn't that was already bought?
we have the land, right.
So,
Right, so the million is to go towards actual construction?
Yeah, the developer.
Is that the idea?
Right, that's, yes,
So my only
yes.
question would be, I support it, I mean, we've been talking
Yeah.
about this for a long time. But the town provided the land. The town bought the land and then gave it to SMOT for this.
Part of it to SMOT,
So
part of it to conservation.
there's the town's subsidy. I'm surprised that the CPC, and this could be a question for Vin in Mike's absence. I'm surprised the CPC is putting in another 1.1 million as opposed to SMOT or CPC just doing an RFR for a developer to come in, to take the land, there's their subsidy, right? And they ought to be able to then develop it with their own funds and, you know, it's subsidized, why does it have to be even further subsidized to the tune of 1.1 million? That's the only part I don't get.
Yeah.
I certainly don't oppose the development.
Yeah.
I cannot justify that for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Ben has his hand, he may
Go
have the
ahead,
information.
Ben?
Yes, well, the way Mike Kopinski presented it to us was that it was important to attract a developer by showing that the town was supporting this project. And we saw this as a committee. I think there was general agreement that this was an opportunity to actually have a win for affordable housing, which has been very hard to do lately. And that in this case, we had the right location. It was a joint effort with open space so that there was an understanding, because it was land that otherwise would be developed differently. There's been so far a lot of support or no opposition from the abutters. So we felt it was a good opportunity to actually, you know, move the ball down the field on community housing, as well as the fact that it'll be a while before additional housing comes on, like from Stow Acres, and this will be an opportunity to bridge that period of time with more housing development, affordable housing development.
I'm underwhelmed by that answer, although I
don't-
appreciate it.
I think
It's all well
let's,
said, I think that's all well said,
Yeah.
and it does state the goals of SMOT, but it doesn't answer your question.
Well,
And I don't think your question is easily answered, I don't think there's
Yeah.
a good reason for Stowe to necessarily,
a free tract of land ought to be enough show of support. I do agree with the idea of
well, we also have a
time.
lot of money in CPC that isn't being used because it's designated for affordable housing. I mean, the
Right.
whole land purchase was 225 or something, I'm looking up the history, but, so it's not like it was a lot of money. And a good chunk of the land went to conservation, it actually didn't all go to SMOT.
Yeah,
So I
so
think there's
900
more to it than in terms of the funds that we need in order to get a developer to actually bid on it, to take over the project, but I'm at the last person to be able to present it well, so
so I'm
I'm gonna just suggest that we don't vote on it tonight. I can ask Smart to come to our next meeting and give us a little bit more
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, you're on the wrong meeting.
Excuse me?
Watching the meeting. No, you're on the selectmen meeting.
Okay. Did they?
It's over. We're done.
Really?
The joint meeting with all of the funding for Massachusetts and all that stuff was a joint meeting, and
Talking.
Do we have to be a part of
But
this?
I'm
Hey
using the.
Bob, we can all hear you.
I just muted them.
Okay.
So let's, I'm just not even gonna worry about that one. Let's just, table this and, I mean, there's no rush. And if we need to get more information before we
Okay.
take a position one way or the other, I don't wanna spend time
Right.
speculating. I didn't think to ask Mike to show up, so.
Well, it's basically has been, I mean, it is basically in the historic bucket. I mean, in the
It's in the
affordable
bucket, right?
900 of the 1.1 million.
But I'm not
is
sure I would say it just as a
already
way to
earmarked.
show interest. I think there's more to it
Yeah,
than
and part
that,
of
so.
me is saying, hey, if CPC's okay with it, who am I to say? But on the other hand,
Well, but that's,
we're recommending a town meeting.
yeah, I want us to feel like we have enough information, so.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to understand the mechanics of it
Yeah.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think if Mike's able to come in next meeting,
Yeah.
I can be persuaded. I wanna fully understand what's happening.
Yeah, that's kind of
Yes.
right.
Was
Yep. So Jim, there was other articles,
So I was suggesting 3, 4, and 56. 3, the wage and salary schedule, 4, the budget, 56, the change to the personnel bylaw, they all sort of seem to go together. It seemed like this year it's important for us to show support for the budget and the wage schedule, because we're anticipating legitimate questions about,
Right.
hey, how come it looks like there were 11% raises, which there aren't. So,
I'll make a motion that the select board support Articles 3, 4, and 56.
second,
any discussion?
No?
All in favor?
aye.
Aye. All right,
You
yeah,
declare
and
that,
actually
can you
interesting,
declare that unanimous, please?
I declare that unanimous, sorry. It used to actually say, didn't it, the columns actually would say town administrator, select board, even though the selectmen never voted on it. I think we used to say that, so I appreciate Denise that you didn't just assume. But we do. Did you have any other ones, Jim?
Real quick,
Okay,
Article 41, National Guard Reserve Tax Relief, is that new?
Yes.
Because it's new, I was thinking maybe we should show some support, it seemed like a good idea.
So that is the equivalent of what was voted last year to allow sort of proxies to fill in. So this would allow, let me see, maybe I don't have the right one. Oh, yes, no, sorry, this is new. This is the one that would allow abatements for members of National Guard on active duty.
I would take no
Overlay.
position on this, but, because this opens up to me, there's a lot of people in public service who don't get abatements, so I'm not won't get into it. I don't know enough, I mean, I don't automatically just support every veteran without looking at National Guard people or weekend warriors, they're not full-time. If it was full-time service people that have to be overseas, yes, but this seems to give it. If I read this,
To reserve, on active duty in foreign countries.
that's for reservists on active duty and
Is
for,
it?
but,
Okay.
well, it's all about punctuation. Members of the Mass National Guard and to reservists on active duty in foreign countries.
Let's skip it.
I'll just want more information, I can read more about it, but, that's just my take on it. But I don't wanna get in the way if other people feel.
Subject to the eligibility to be established by the assessors. Yeah.
Denise, is your understanding is for anyone in the National Guard and any reservists who went on foreign active duty?
That is my understanding, yes.
So National Guard would be people who go to the weekend training. Not necessarily people who got activated and sent to foreign countries.
No.
So maybe we could get clarification.
Yeah, I'll get clarification from Kristen. I don't believe it covers just those doing weekend
Okay.
assignments.
Yeah, it could be just, it's almost punctuation or
Yeah,
whatever.
okay, let's get clarification.
Okay,
So my other suggestion, another thing I think is new, but I'm not sure, Article 48, well, yeah, it is new, the
Yes.
capital stabilization.
Yes, it is.
And my first was a question, how does this differ from the regular stabilization fund? And, I mean, what additional flexibility does it give us?
So it doesn't give us more flexibility, it actually limits the flexibility. With the regular stabilization account, we could, that is your traditional rainy day, if we had a budget shortfall, if we needed to pretty much fund any municipal purpose with a 2/3 vote of town meeting, we could allocate those fundings. This would be strictly for capital expenditures. So this is a way to start saving money that's dedicated to capital, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's equipment, whether it's vehicles, so that if we have a project of infrastructure that needs several $1 million and we start chipping away by adding this into a savings account, we could then reallocate this funding out. You wouldn't need a debt exclusion vote, you wouldn't need free cash, where we have a couple million in free cash, it's more than we could cover. A capital stabilization account, you could use that to pay debt service on capital projects, or you could use it to just pay cash outright. So it's just another funding mechanism dedicated for capital expenses.
Do you propose to fund it regularly like we do the
Stabilization and OPEB and, yep.
OPEB? That's
Yep.
right, okay. I propose we support, I'll move that we support Article 48.
so I'll
I'll
second.
second.
All right,
No,
she'll
you
second.
can second it.
Any questions, Megan, or any, Courtney?
No.
All good? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
and that is unanimous.
My last one, 50 looked like I don't remember that round of a number in prior years, and I think it's probably important, since we are pretty much involved in those kinds of things, that
We should support that.
we should probably support this.
Fair.
Yes, it is up, it's up from the 75,000 that was this year, and as you can see, the balance is $20,000, and we still have March, April, May, and June to fund of our legal bills. Once courts resumed after COVID, our costs are just increasing.
Right. Okay,
I'll move that we support Article 50.
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Okay. We good?
I'm good, that's all I have, thank you.
All right, so now we need to just vote, the actual vote on acceptance of the warrant, which is really, should we take out the language pending legal edits, or should we leave that in there?
You may, because it is now
All
final.
done.
Madam Chair, I move to accept the warrant for the May 14th, 2022 annual town meeting dated April 26th, 2022 by town council, oh, sorry.
Period.
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 Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 That is unanimous. All right, that's a wrap, except for that we added those few things in, but, so next meeting, we will get clarification on the National Guard and on SMOT, and, we can decide before town meeting if we wanna say anything more when we support the articles, but otherwise, we're good. Okay, meeting minutes, April 12th. Any comments on the minutes?
I thought they were great.
Yes, they were very good.
That woman just knows how to spend hours
Yay,
listening
Joyce.
to us on a recording, and so, I will take a motion.
I move to accept the minutes of the April 12th, 2022 meeting as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 That's unanimous. Great. Anything on correspondence that anybody had any comments on?
No.
I feel like we just went through, oh, it was
Wasn't
really,
much
that's
there.
right, it was really short, that's right.
We were going
Just
through
the
things,
hearing.
right?
Yes, right. Okay,
Move to adjourn.
to adjourn,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. All right, thanks, hope you feel better, Megan.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Good luck with that. All right, and off we go.